Guys, Jeremy here, the most trustworthy financial advisor on YouTube and host of a free financial community at jeremybr.com. In this video, I want to show you biblically that lending is actually more generous than giving. And before I get into the verses, I want to just start anecdotally with the story from my family, and I'll spare you the details, but my maternal side from my father, how do you say that? My dad's mom, her side, the Kieschnick side. My grandma uh, was the daughter of a business owner. He owned a feed store in Central Texas, and there were moments. This was not an uncommon practice, according to my grandma, but something that he was honestly known for is when farmers in the area sometimes got out of luck. Maybe they had a season where crop just didn't produce and their finances were, as a result, in disarray, and they couldn't get a loan from a bank to sow and till for the next harvest. My great grandpa and the Kieschnick family would extend seed, and they would say, "Hey, you can just like don't even worry about it. Just pay me back when you have it. I'm not charging interest. I'm not trying to corner you. I know that your farm, your property means a lot to you. Obviously, you could sell it all and just go get a random job as a random hired hand, but I'm not here trying to make you eat the suffering that this hand um that life dealt you, but hey, here's some seed. Don't worry about it. Pay me back when you have it." And his funeral was incredibly well attended. I'll just put it like that. There was not room to sit out of how many people had been touched by what? By the curses that he was putting on people, enslaving them with debt? No, by the generosity that he showed people to lend, not with his own profit in mind, but to lend to empower people to work, empower people to create, empower people to build. And many of those people obviously ultimately did pay him back. And how validating for a person to get to be good on their word. How empowering for a person to be trusted relationally. How empowering for a person to get to do something productive with their hands and see the fruit of their labor, right? To receive the respect and validation, not not to be left forever in humiliation for their financial shortcomings or for their hardships, but actually to be given a hand through a loan that says, hey, there's a path for you to not live in this shame forever, but to have a comeback. And it's so much more psychologically beneficial, even though, yeah, from just dotting the I's, crossing the T's, like this wasn't a great business deal. They didn't pay it back with interest. They didn't pay back four times what they owed. Like it's not like they needed help, but the help was actually a bigger blessing for their soul in the form of a loan than it would have been with just a handout. If you just give a handout, guess what? For the rest of their life, they have to remember, oh man, Peepaw Kieschnick, like without him, I'd be screwed. But to be able to pay back what you borrowed over time when you have it, not with pressure, but as a way to show respect for yourself then you get to say, of course, I'm thankful for this man. And like I said, his funeral was well attended, right? But it's not hanging over my head as if I wronged him or as if I cost him because I did pay him back. I did actually create a surplus value and I do actually get to net the difference. And that is empowering and enabling far more than a handout ever could be. But let's move away from the anecdotes and let's get into scripture because actually the Bible portrays lending as a generous act that we should do with generosity. And actually giving, there there are plenty, of course, of verses that encourage generous giving, but there are several that encourage a conscientiousness or even a carefulness about giving in a way that you don't see about lending. You don't see a careful lending warning in scripture. You do see some commands about borrowing and how to do it well and how not to do it well. You do see a encouragement not to guarantee someone else's debt. So that's a little different, right? But let's dive into it so that you can assess for yourself because you are your own decision maker. So let's start with some verses showing the instruction or the counsel to lend generously. Starting in Exodus 22, it says, "Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do, and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows, and your children fatherless." So, this is how strongly God is saying, don't you dare take advantage of the widow and orphan. Go to the next verse. "If you lend money to one of my people who is needy, do not treat it like a business deal. Charge no interest." Let me just, every one of these verses, if you are being honest, you would think the next command, like, don't take advantage of these people. If you do, I will kill you. You would think the next verse would be just give them money, give them shelter, give them food. And when the next sentence starts with, if you lend money to someone that's poor, you would think the second half of that sentence is, and I'll kill you for that too, right? Because we associate this such negative stigma with lending and borrowing that's cultural and it's not biblical. So let's read it. It says, hey, don't charge interest. If you extend a loan to someone who is poor, do not treat it like an investment. Treat it like generosity. Don't charge interest on the deal. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it by sunset, because that cloak is the only covering your neighbor has. What else can they sleep in? When they cry out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. So the pledge, the collateral, it's saying don't even hold on to the collateral. Just give the loan and let them pay back as they are able. Next verse. Matthew 5, give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. So this is a command from Jesus saying, hey, if someone wants to borrow from you, lend to them. And I will say, he's speaking in a Jewish context. Any of this asking for funds, if you read the Old Testament, and we'll get into it in future videos, but it is in the context of borrowing. It's not in the context of a handout. And let's read Luke's version of this same kind of teaching from Jesus that will kind of highlight it. Because Luke says the same thing, give to the one who asks you. It says, if you love, and right after that, this is Luke kind of explaining that a little farther according to Jesus' teaching. It says, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And here's the key. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great. You'll be children of the Most High because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. So, how are we going to show mercy? By generously lending. The context, it's not give to them, but it's lend to them, and in your heart, let it be as a gift for their integrity, for their reputation, for their self-esteem. They can pay you back what they owe you, right? But and if they don't, biblically they're considered wicked. That's why he's saying he's kind to the ungrateful and the wicked, because the one who borrows and does not repay is considered wicked. So, but it's still a lending that you're called to do, not a giving without strings attached. Even like we've already read, even with people who are widows or fatherless, if you were in this situation of extreme financial lack, or some like, what am I trying to say? Culturally, it would be offensive even to offer a no interest loan with no time horizon, just pay back what you owe. If I extended that to you and you were homeless or you were poor, you were without a job, you were without a family, no one to take care of you, culturally, you would probably be very offensive. You'd be like, F you, Jeremy. Freaking Ebenezer Scrooge up in here. But biblically, that's what we're commanded to do, right? To extend a loan, to allow someone to borrow, and to allow myself to be taken advantage of, not coming after the collateral, aware that I might not get a single dime of that back, but still willing to lend. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that it would still be a loan? It would still be lending. If you were going to give to someone or lend to someone that is that so poor or so unfortunate, and they have no intention of even creating anything of value with it, they're just going to use it for their food and shelter. They have no prospects, no plausibility that they'll be able to pay you back. Why wouldn't God say, you know what, just give it to them? Just give it to them. Don't even call it a loan. Just give it. No, he says lend it. Your choice is to lend. Their choice is to not pay back. But you know what? You get to be the hands of God showing mercy for their inability to pay back their loan. And that is what's considered generous. Let's keep going. Proverbs 11, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. People curse the one who hoards grain, but they pray God's blessing on the one who is willing to give. No, the one who is willing to sell. The one who's willing to sell. The generous person is the person who's willing to sell. So rather than, you know, padding your own bank accounts and accumulating, hoarding with no end in sight, it's saying, why don't you be willing to just sell to someone that really could use that money, use that wheat, use that whatever. And when your wealth leads to others' wealth, right? As your tide rises, others' tides are rising. They will pray for God's blessing over you. I mean, just amazing. That it's amazing that this doesn't say give, right? The generosity expressed not through just giving away, but expressed through even continuing to sell rather than taking advantage and starving people out and then raising the price to something they could never afford. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. I mean, so amazing. So amazing that serving, showing kindness, showing love, lending to the poor is associated by God so fondly that he considers it as if you extended a loan to him. So what's the heavenly perspective on receiving a loan, on borrowing? The heavenly perspective is this was so generous. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to make this right by you and to use this resource to create a better life for myself. Thank you. Do you think the heavenly context of this verse is whoever is kind to the poor enslaves the Lord with a curse? The borrower is slave to the lender, right? That verse in Proverbs is talking about a worldly corruption of what God intended. But no, the heavenly hope, the purpose, the glorious version of borrowing and lending is one of economic prosperity, one of hope, one of empowerment, and one even of generosity. That even the Lord Himself would say, man, thank you for lending to me when I was in need because I needed to borrow. Crazy, crazy. And let's go into some verses about generosity and see if we could pick up on a couple themes where giving has some caution, has some like, hey, maybe be careful a little bit. So first off, Matthew 6 says, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So if you give to the needy, don't announce it. But when you give, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. So one way we want to be careful when we're giving is to be careful to be discreet, careful to be in secret, not even publicly, but even internally. Don't even don't even count the dollars, right? Like my peepaw. Don't even count how much you missed out on unearned interest on that loan. Like don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. But when we give, we want to do it so carefully as it relates to um, how much credit are we taking, or how much are we keeping track of this, and especially how much praise are we receiving, or earthly rewards are we receiving for this giving. Another thing you want to be careful of when you're giving. This one is Paul. He's asking people to consider giving. And he's saying, our desire is not that others might be relieved while you are hard pressed, but that there might be equality. So, what do we want to be careful of when we're giving? You want to be careful that you are not harming yourself or suffering yourself beyond the suffering of those you are giving to. Now, if you do, it's still, if you do knowingly and willingly, then it's still an honorable thing to do. But Paul's saying that's not the general goal we're going for. We're not trying to compel someone that's worse off financially to give to someone that's better off financially. He's saying our hope is just that when you have surplus, that you would give to those in lack. So then one day when they're in surplus, they might give to you when you're in lack. We're just going for equality here. So when you're just giving, you want to be careful that you are not giving from lack, but that you're giving from surplus, and that you're giving to a situation of lack rather than giving to a situation that already has surplus. Another thing you want to be careful of, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So when you give, and it's no strings attached, it's not a loan, it's just giving, saying, hey, you make sure that you are giving what you really want to give. Don't do it with reluctance. Don't do it with compulsion. Don't be manipulated to give. You got to make sure that you really want to give this. Because if you give money away that deep down you didn't really want to give, but you felt like you should, that is going to cause resentment. It's going to cause bitterness. It's going to be a curse for your own soul and for the other person because the other person's going to feel it. Whereas when you extend a loan, you're going to get that money back. And okay, you lost out on some interest. Okay, like what you gave in the opportunity was worth so much to that person compared to what you sacrificed in terms of unearned interest or what you could have used that capital for. But when you give cash and there's no expectation for repayment, it costs you maybe even more than it benefits them, depending on what you would have done with it and what they ultimately end up doing with it. And so you got to be careful that you're only giving what you really do want to give. With lending, you don't have to be so careful. Last one here. Check out Paul instructing Timothy on how to handle this situation where aid is needed. He's saying, give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, these should lean first of all to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family and so repaying their parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. So he's saying, first of all, if you are giving to a widow, you need to be careful and consider, is there a better way that they could have received this aid? If they have kids or grandkids, then the kids or grandkids should be the one giving them money, paying for their life, sheltering them, feeding them. It should not be on you. You need to let it be from their family, for this is pleasing to God. And he keeps going. It says, the widow who is really in need of help and left all alone puts her hope in God and continues night and day to pray and to ask God for help. But the widow who lives for pleasure is dead even while she lives. So you could extrapolate from these next two verses and say, hey, when you give, you want to be careful that you are giving towards righteousness and not towards unrighteousness. You could extrapolate that. He doesn't say that verbatim, but he's differentiating. Some widows are righteously hoping for God, for help from God, and some are maybe just sleeping around, living promiscuous lives, and indulging in whatever they can. And it's interesting that Paul makes that differentiation. He says, give the people these instructions so that no one may be open to blame. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Holy smokas. He keeps going. No widow may be put on the list of widows, meaning on the church giving list, unless she's over 60. She's been faithful to her husband, is well known for her good deeds, such as bringing up children, showing hospitality, washing the feet of the Lord's people, helping those in trouble, and devoting herself to all kinds of good deeds. Fascinating, right? So you want to give carefully to those who are in most need of the giving and most deserving, apparently, of the giving. And the deserving is as it relates to their own character, their personal choices. It says, as for younger widows, do not put them on such a call list or on such a giving list. Meaning, even if they don't have family, if they don't have kids, they don't have grandkids, no one else can help them, still don't give to them. For when their sensual desires overcome their dedication to Christ, they want to marry. Thus, they bring judgment on themselves because they have broken their first pledge. Besides, they get into the habit of being idle and going about from house to house. And not only do they become idlers, but also busybodies who talk nonsense, saying things they ought not to. I mean, this is a little judgmental coming from Paul, but let's get at his recommendation, which is in this last verse. He says, "So I counsel younger widows to marry, to have children, to manage their homes, and to give the enemy no opportunity for slander." So if you are a younger widow and no one else is there to take care of you, the counsel that Paul's giving is you got to find a husband that's going to provide for you. You're young enough, you have a way out. You need to do whatever you can to provide for yourself. And in the case of these widows, that meant marrying, making yourself an eligible bachelorette and having a family. I'm not saying that that is specifically culturally authoritative today. I'm just saying, isn't it interesting how giving was treated with some more considerations than lending? And often we assume that giving with no strings attached is the holier choice, the more generous choice. And again, if it's in your heart to give, you have the capacity to give, and you feel good about giving, and the person you're giving to is like, there's just all of a sudden, there's so many more considerations. And I'm not trying to discourage anyone from giving, and I don't feel like the Bible discourages people from giving. I don't think that's the theme. But I do think that lending generously is more representative of God's heart. And there's a reason why it is characterized so favorably. It's the reason why that generous lending is the way that God set up humanitarian aid in his people and his nation was through generous lending. And it's representative in a way almost of the way that Jesus gives and gave to his people. You could say like he died for us, like he gave us a gift with no strings attached. And it's like, well, I mean like kind of like there's no you can pay it back and you're never going to pay it back, but like to show yourself worthy of the calling, to express a heart of gratitude is also to choose righteousness. It's also to honor him and to follow the commands. It's to believe in him. It's to attach yourself to him. It's a relationship that he wants to walk with you. So yeah, could you pray one prayer and maybe you get in heaven? Like maybe, but like the goal was not giving with no strings attached. The goal was I want to empower you. I want to create something in you, and I know that you can through what I'm extending to you, through the seed of Christ in your heart. So let it abound into good works, right? And good faith, good belief, good virtue, all sorts of stuff. I'm not trying to preach a spiritual sermon here. I'm trying to say that, hey, lending generously is maybe the more biblical way to give, and that giving is with no strings attached is maybe something to view with a little bit more caution than we're used to culturally, rather than assuming that we're doing the more holy thing 10 times out of 10. Ultimately, we want to empower people, right? We want the best for people. And we just have to think what's going to create the best for people. The only reason you would have a rejection to this theme, I mean, I'm interested in the comments if you have some really hard pressed rejections to this counsel. It's a new thought for me too. It's not what I expected to find in scripture when I did a deep dive into it. But I think culturally we reject this message because we think because of Dave Ramsey and some random pastor we knew growing up that debt is bad and it's imprisonment and it's slavery and it's a curse and it's bondage, and we make up this narrative that we don't actually believe. But when we try to believe it or pretend like we believe it, we end up giving in a way that's often more harmful to people, more harmful to our own hearts, and instead of a way that biblically seems to have a lot of runway and maybe is actually more empowering for other people and more of a blessing to our own hearts. Like, man, let me lend with generosity. And this is different than lending as an investment. Today in our world, we have securitized debt. I'm not talking about lending for return. There's a place for that within your investment portfolio potentially. If you're curious about that, I am an advisor and you're welcome to reach out. I'm talking about lending as intended generally, which is to be an act of trust, empowerment, and generosity to help someone that is lower in the economic totem pole ascend into a place that is higher. The biblical way to create wealth is to borrow. All right. Talk to y'all in the next one. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, subscribing, all of that. Later.